My name is Fallon Miller. I am 38 years old. For as long as I can remember, my family had a role for everyone. My sister Jocelyn was the perfect one. My brother Connor was the quiet one. And me, I was the careless one. In front of neighbors, friends, anyone who would listen. Last May at our family's spring gala, my Aunt Penelope pointed me out to a man she assumed was lost. She said, and I quote, "This is our dirt digger, the messy one." I was standing right there, 38 years old, in front of 50 wealthy guests. But here is what none of them knew. That man was not a random stranger. And what he did next completely shattered the fake reality my family had built. Welcome back to Final Cosmic, where real emotions meet karmic justice. If you have ever been the scapegoat to hide your family's flaws, this story is for you. Drop a comment sharing your unfair family label. I read every single one. And if you are new here, hit subscribe so you never miss a story. I was 8 years old the first time the cage locked around me. Jocelyn was 10. It was a Saturday, April 14th, and my mother Delilah was handing out the spring cleaning chores for our home in Harpertown. Everyone got a task inside the climate-controlled, immaculate house. My cousins, my sister, even my aunt's stepdaughter. Everyone was trusted with the crystal or the polished mahogany except me. "Fallon is too careless with delicate things," my mother said when I asked why I was excluded. "She breaks focus." I was given a crushed, faded yellow bucket and told to pull weeds around the centuries-old, ruined historical greenhouse at the very back of our property. That afternoon, Aunt Penelope came over for a lavish patio lunch. I remember standing near the edge of the manicured lawn in my dirt-stained knees, holding that bucket, while Penelope held Jocelyn's clean, manicured hands and said, "These hands are going to design beautiful homes one day." Then she looked at me, tilted her head toward the greenhouse, and told the neighbor, "That one always has dirt under her fingernails, too negligent to hold on to anything valuable." My mother was standing right there. She didn't say, "That is cruel." She let out a soft, breathy laugh, the kind that seals a verdict. I stood there, an 8-year-old holding dead weeds, realizing that being labeled careless wasn't a temporary mistake. It was a life sentence. My mother, I would discover later, was quietly terrified of financial ruin, projecting her own deep insecurities onto us to maintain an illusion of upper-class perfection. But I didn't know about the bank notices yet. All I knew was that my sister got a pedestal, and I got a label. Once that label was applied, the entire family organized itself around it. School achievements, for instance. Every spring the art fair came around. My mother paid $125 for custom framing for Jocelyn's watercolor paintings. My pressed botanical notebooks went onto a dusty shelf in the garage next to the lawnmower. Birthdays. Jocelyn got elaborate, catered garden parties at 12, and a country club dinner at 16. My birthday was 2 weeks after my brother Connor's. Every year my mother bought one cake. It always said, "Happy birthday, Connor," with my name scribbled along the cardboard base in thin blue icing, melting like an afterthought. Christmas morning, Jocelyn opened boxes of designer fabrics, color swatches, and expensive sketch pads to feed her interior design dreams. The year she turned 17, I was handed a generic $12.99 set of plastic trowels. "You like playing in the dirt, right?" my mother would say. It wasn't a question, it was the boundary of my cage. Connor played his part perfectly. He accepted the role of the silent observer and ran with it straight out of Harpertown at 18, taking a corporate job 300 miles away. He wasn't malicious toward me, but his silence was its own heavy agreement. If you want to know how a family truly values you, look at what they preserve. Our living room didn't just have photos, it had a massive oak display cabinet. My mother arranged it like a museum exhibit. It held Jocelyn's academic trophies, her framed certificates, and delicate porcelain figurines. It held Connor's debate medals. It held nothing of mine. Once, when I was 11, I placed a perfectly dried, rare blue hydrangea on the bottom shelf. It was swept into the trash the next morning because my mother claimed dead leaves make the house look unkempt. At Jocelyn's high school graduation, my mother hired a professional photographer for 2 hours, costing $450. At my graduation 2 years later, she took one blurry photo on her phone while looking the other way to wave at a neighbor. That summer, I started carrying a small notebook and a cheap digital camera. I documented my own life. I took photos of my first successful sprout, the day I cleared the eastern wall of the old greenhouse, the first time I mapped the root system of an oak. When no one considers your life worth recording, you become your own archivist. I left home at 18. I was accepted into Southern University's Horticulture and Historical Landscape Architecture program. My mother's reaction landed exactly as I expected. Swift, dismissive, and wrapped in a polite insult. "Landscaping?" she said, tracing the edge of her pristine kitchen counter. "That isn't really a career for someone so careless, Fallon. You'll just let everything wither." The way she said everything about me always felt like a cold breeze, just enough to make you shiver, but not enough to complain about. I didn't know then that her sharp words were really a shield. I didn't know that every time I talked about planting strong roots, something inside her panicked. That truth would reveal itself later, and when it did, it would explain the heavy sadness in our home. My father, Gordon, drove me to the university. It was a 4-hour drive on Highway 95, windows up, the radio turned off. He was a deeply quiet man. He had spent his entire marriage in a house where Delilah's voice was the only sound that mattered. His quietness had turned into a thick, solid wall over the years. But when he parked near my dorm building and pulled my heavy bags from the trunk, he did something I will never forget. He didn't give me a grand speech. Instead, he reached into his coat and handed me a small, carved wooden box. I opened it. Inside were dozens of dry, gray seeds. "These belong to your grandmother," he said softly. "They are heirloom flowers, extinct now. Everyone says they are dead." He looked at me, his eyes full of a quiet, steady belief. Bring them back to life. It was the only real gift I had ever received. I hugged him tight, and he held on for a long time. Then he drove away. That first night, I placed the small wooden box on my dorm desk. My roommate, a girl from Ohio named Maya, looked at it and asked about my family. What I said was, "They are fine." What I meant was, I just drove 4 hours to escape a house where I am invisible, and for the first time in 18 years my chest doesn't feel tight. Building a career in the soil is like growing an oak tree. It happens in the dark, underground, long before anyone sees the leaves. During my junior year, I took an unpaid internship at the State Botanical Garden. I worked nights at a diner near the school. I served pancakes and hot coffee from 5 p.m. to midnight, then woke up at 6 a.m. to test soil acidity at the gardens. My shoes were always muddy. My hands were always tired. But the garden had an old library with records of every lost plant species in the state, and I read every single page. My first real breakthrough came 10 years later, when I was 28. It wasn't a building or a park. It was the seeds my father gave me. I had spent a decade caring for them, adjusting the pH levels of the dirt, and matching the exact temperature of my grandmother's era. Finally, one morning in March, a rare, vibrant silver-blue flower opened its petals. I wrote a 40-page research paper on how to revive extinct flora. I sent it to the National Botanical Society. They didn't just read it. They gave me a $250,000 research grant. My work was suddenly printed in national agriculture magazines. My family knew nothing about it. I had stopped trying to share my life after a Thanksgiving dinner when I showed them my first small published article. My mother just glanced at it and said, "That is nice, Fallon. Jocelyn just booked a $50,000 home staging contract for a rich client." I learned to grow my success in total silence. I didn't hide because I was ashamed. I hid because they never bothered to look for me. I was 20 years old the first time I truly understood my mother. I had come home from college for a weekend. The house was empty. My mother was at a charity lunch, and Jocelyn was supposedly at her design office. I went into the hall closet to find a heavy winter blanket. Tucked away on the very top shelf, hidden under old winter coats, was a gray metal lockbox. It was slightly open. I looked inside. It wasn't a box of old memories. It was a box of pure panic. Inside were past due bank notices, red-stamped warning letters, and a secret financial ledger. I flipped through the pages. Jocelyn's interior design business was not successful. It was completely bankrupt. Jocelyn was drowning in massive debt. The ledger showed that my mother, Delilah, had been secretly draining my parents' retirement savings to pay off Jocelyn's failed loans. My mother was not an evil queen. She was a terrified woman. I sat on the closet floor, holding the bank papers. The dust danced in the hallway light. I finally understood the truth. Every time I brought home a good grade, every time I showed I was independent, my mother didn't see a careless daughter. She saw a mirror of reality she was too scared to face. She needed Jocelyn to be perfect to hide the fact that they were losing everything. She called me negligent so no one would see how careless they had been with their own lives. I put the lockbox back exactly how I found it. I never told her I knew her secret. You would think that knowing the truth would fix the broken pieces. You would think that moving away fixes things, that time and distance, and growing a life with your own 2 hands, would change the story. But families have deep roots and very short memories. They remember the label they gave you. They forget to look at the person you grew into. 3 years before the big spring event, I drove 4 hours for Thanksgiving. I went because my father asked. My mother never asked. Jocelyn was standing in the driveway, showing off. She was leaning against a brand new $80,000 luxury SUV. My mother was rubbing her hand across the shiny car door like it was made of gold. "Jocelyn, this is just gorgeous. You always have the best taste," she said. I knew from the hidden lockbox that the car was leased and Jocelyn was drowning in debt, but I kept quiet. I sat on the porch with my tea. Connor's new wife, Claire, was sitting near me. Claire worked in accounting. She had just joined the family. She had a quiet, sharp way of watching people. When there was a break in the loud talking, I mentioned my $250,000 research grant from the Botanical Society. Silence. 2 full seconds of nothing. Then my mother said, "That is nice. Can you pass the rolls?" Jocelyn leaned against her shiny leased car and tilted her head. "Is that like a cute little community garden project?" she asked. I said no. Jocelyn smiled tightly. "Well, it sounds like a nice hobby." Claire looked at Jocelyn, then looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly, but she didn't say a word. After dinner, I went to the kitchen. My mother was at the sink. Aunt Penelope was wiping the counters. They thought I was in the hallway, but I was right behind the door. My mother used her soft, secret voice. "At least she stays out of the way playing in the dirt," she told Penelope. "I just wish she would do something about." And then she made that hand gesture, the same dismissive wave, brushing me away like dead leaves. Penelope laughed. I held my breath, turned around and drove 4 hours home in the dark. 7 months later, my father had a minor stroke. He lost some feeling on his left side, but he could still talk. I drove 4 hours to the hospital in the middle of the night. When I walked into his room, my mother and Jocelyn were already there. My mother looked at me. "Oh, you came." It was not a warm greeting, it was surprise. Like a stranger had walked into her private room. I stayed for 4 days. While my father rested, I went to his house to find his medical insurance cards. I looked in his dusty garage workbench. That is when I found it. In the bottom drawer, under some old tools, there was a thick brown envelope held together with a rubber band. I opened it. Inside were papers. Every single paper was about me. There were cut-out pages from farming magazines, printed pages from botanical websites, and a printed photo of the rare silver-blue flower I brought back to life. He had printed it on cheap paper, so the colors were a little dull. The envelope held 10 years of my life. Some of the printed web pages had very long internet addresses. That meant my father had sat at his slow computer and typed every single letter, one by one, to find my work. He never told my mother. He just kept it safe in the dark. I sat on the cold garage floor with the heavy envelope in my lap. I did not cry. I just held the proof that someone had been quietly watching me bloom. Later, my father saw me holding the envelope. He just gave a small nod. He never said the words, but he kept my history safe. May arrived. The air was warm, smelling of fresh rain and cut grass. It was time for the annual Spring Floral Gala in Harpertown. My mother and Aunt Penelope hosted it every year at the local community center. It was a place for the rich to show off. I had not gone in 3 years. This year I went for my father. His stroke made him tired. He walked with a cane now. His face looked heavy. He asked me to come, so I said yes. Meanwhile, at my job, something big was happening. Mr. Thomas, the director of the National Botanical Society, had been emailing me for 4 months. He wanted to build a new plant research center. He wanted to use my grant money to buy the land, and he wanted me to pick the exact spot. We sent polite, professional emails about soil quality and sunlight. In one email, I told him I would be in Harpertown for the weekend for a family event. I told him the town had very rich, untouched soil. If I am ever in the area, I might just stop by, he wrote back. I didn't think much of it. People say they will visit, and then they don't. That is how life usually works. You make a quiet plan in your mind, and then life happens, and the plan blows away like dandelion seeds in the wind. I told a kind man about some good soil. I did not invite him to step inside the heavy cage of my family. I parked my car behind the large brick community center at 6 o'clock in the evening. The parking lot was packed. There were shiny black town cars, expensive silver SUVs, and women walking carefully in high heels. Long tables covered in pure white cloths were set up inside the hall. Waiters carried silver trays of roasted chicken and tiny fancy appetizers. I sat in my car for 4 minutes. I counted my breaths in the quiet. Breathe in for 5 seconds, breathe out for 7. It was a simple trick I learned to stop my hands from shaking. Then, I opened my door and walked inside. The greetings at the door told the same exact story they always did. Jocelyn arrived wearing a sparkling silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. There were loud gasps and tight hugs. "Jocelyn, you look like a movie star," a neighbor cried out. My mother held a crystal glass and beamed with pride. I walked through the doors next. Uncle Roland stood near a table of iced tea. He gave me a gentle, tired nod. "Good to see you, Fallon," he said softly. Aunt Penelope did not even look up. She was busy arranging tall glass vases of imported roses and whispering to a friend about a neighbor's bad haircut. My mother was standing right in the center of the room. She saw me, stopped for a second, and then smiled a wide, fake smile. "Oh, Fallon, you made it." She said it with a high pitch, like an actor on a stage. She wanted all the wealthy people in the room to see what a sweet, welcoming mother she was, but her eyes were completely cold. I found my father sitting away from the crowd. He was in a padded chair tucked in the corner, right next to a large potted fern. He wanted to be away from the loud string music playing on the speakers. His wooden cane was leaning against the wall. He had a glass of water on the small table next to him. I sat in the empty chair by his side. He reached over and squeezed my hand. We did not need to use any words. Near the front entrance, there was a stack of beautifully printed, glossy Gala programs. They had a list of the honored host family on the back page. The list had my mother's name, my father's name, Jocelyn's name, Connor's name, and even Claire's name. My name was nowhere on the paper. It was just a blank white space where a daughter should be. My mother had carefully planned where everyone would sit for dinner. She used thick white paper and gold ink for the name cards. The main VIP table was right near the front stage. I walked slowly past the chairs. I read the gold writing: Delilah, Gordon, Jocelyn, Penelope, Connor, Claire. I kept walking. My name was not at the second best table either. It was not at the third. I was expected to find my own seat at the small, wobbly overflow table way in the back, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. So, I sat there. I sat between a grumpy teenager who was tapping angrily on a phone and a distant cousin who kept complaining that the room was too cold. From my lonely seat in the back, I could see the main VIP table perfectly. Jocelyn was talking loudly about her imaginary new design clients. "The budget for the house is endless," she laughed, waving her hand. My mother leaned forward, her eyes shining with fake pride, soaking up the attention. Claire was sitting at the edge of the table. She kept looking down at her cloth napkin. Her face was very still. She knew about the secret lockbox. She knew the money was gone, but she stayed quiet. The distant cousin next to me finally looked at my face. "So what exactly do you do again?" she asked. Before I could even open my mouth, Aunt Penelope's loud voice cut through the air. She was walking past our table with a fresh drink. "She just plays in the dirt," Penelope said to the cousin. She waved her hand in the air, doing the exact same brushing motion my mother always did, always digging up weeds. "I am a botanical researcher," I said. My voice was quiet but very clear. Penelope laughed a sharp, dry laugh. Right, like a lawnmower girl. From the front table, my mother did not even turn her head to look at me. "Jocelyn, tell everyone about the new silk curtains you ordered for the master bedroom," she called out. I ate my dinner in complete silence. The roasted chicken was dry. The water in my glass tasted like metal. I watched the family dance I had been watching my whole life. The golden sister pretending to be a queen. The terrified mother pretending her kingdom wasn't falling apart. The cruel aunt playing her part. I had watched this play for almost 30 years. But sitting by the kitchen doors, I did not feel like a ghost anymore. Sometimes, when a family pushes you all the way into the dark background, it gives you the best view of the whole room. They thought I was blind, but I was the only one who could see the truth clearly. After dinner, at exactly 8 p.m., the big lights in the hall went dark. My mother pointed a small remote. A large white screen dropped down from the ceiling. She had rented a $2,000 digital projector to show a presentation called "The Beautiful History of Our Family." "Remember when" became the theme of the next hour. Remember when Jocelyn won the high school beauty contest. Remember when Jocelyn stood in her new design office. Remember when we all took a trip to the beach and Jocelyn wore that expensive white hat. I sat at the wobbly table in the back and watched. The screen clicked from picture to picture. I counted them. There were exactly 250 pictures in the presentation. I was only in 5 of them. In the first one, I was hidden behind a tall cousin. In the second, I was pushed to the very edge of the frame, holding a dirty shovel, looking like I was already walking away. In the third, someone's hand covered my face, and in the fifth, the one my eyes stayed on, I was 8 years old. I was standing far away in the dirt, holding that faded yellow bucket. No one in the picture was looking at me. No one in the bright hall noticed either. No one watched 250 pictures and asked, "Where is Fallon?" My family had slowly erased me, picture by picture. Jocelyn was always such a perfect flower, Aunt Penelope said softly into the dark room. She really was, my mother agreed. I needed to breathe. The air in the room felt too thick. I stood up quietly and walked down the long, empty hallway to the community center's coat room. My father had asked me to fetch his heart medicine from his jacket. It was dark and quiet back there. The loud party music sounded far away. I found his heavy gray winter coat. I reached deep into the left pocket. I felt the smooth plastic of the medicine bottle. But my fingers brushed against something else too. It was a small, soft leather book. I pulled it out and turned on the small hallway light. It was a tiny photo album. I opened the cover. Inside were 18 glossy pictures. My mother had taken one blurry picture of me at my college graduation. But my father, my quiet, tired father, had taken 18 beautiful pictures of me. He had used a cheap $10 disposable camera. He had taken pictures of me standing in the ruined greenhouse. He took a picture of me holding my very first healthy green plant. He took a picture of me smiling on my 22nd birthday, wiping sweat from my forehead. And right in the middle, there was a close-up picture of the rare silver-blue flower I had grown. I was looking right at the camera. My face was open, happy and proud. I did not look careless. I looked strong. On the inside of the leather cover, written in my father's neat handwriting, were 3 words: Fallon's beautiful work. I sat on the floor among the hanging coats. I held the 18 pictures my father took of the daughter my mother pretended was invisible. 18. He took 18. I carefully took the picture of me holding the silver-blue flower out of the book and slid it into my pocket. My pocket felt heavy with a good secret. I put the leather book back in his coat, grabbed the medicine bottle, and took a deep breath. I walked back into the main hall. The lights were back on. The waiters were pouring more iced tea. Suddenly, the heavy glass front doors opened. A man stepped inside. He was 60 years old, dressed cleanly in a dark blue suit. He carried a brown leather briefcase under his arm. He looked around the room full of silk dresses and fancy flowers. He did not fit in. It was Mr. Thomas, the director of the National Botanical Society. He had driven 90 miles to get here. He saw me standing near the hallway and walked straight to me. "Fallon," he said with a kind smile. "You actually came." "I told you I was going to be here," I said. He looked around the loud room. I wanted to look at the soil around town, but I also brought the official land purchase papers for the new research center. I thought we could read them, but if this is a bad time, I can wait in my car. I looked at the room. My mother was fixing the dessert table. Jocelyn was taking a picture of herself with her shiny phone. Aunt Penelope was judging someone's shoes. "It is always a bad time here," I said softly. "Come on." I led him away from the important people. We walked to the wobbly overflow table in the back. We sat down together near the kitchen doors. He opened his brown leather briefcase and pulled out the $250,000 grant papers. He sat at the back table with me. He was the first person in my life who ever chose to sit there. It took Aunt Penelope exactly 15 minutes to notice. She had an alarm in her head for anything that did not look perfect, and a serious man in a dark suit opening important papers at the worst table in the room was not perfect. Penelope walked over to our table. Her dress made a soft swishing sound. She held a glass of pink lemonade. She gave Mr. Thomas a smile that was as sharp as broken glass. "Well, hello," she said loudly. "Are you lost?" I tried to speak. "Aunt Penelope, this is..." She did not let me finish. She looked at Mr. Thomas and pointed a long finger at me. "This is our little dirt digger, the careless one. We just let her play in the mud so she doesn't break our nice things." She laughed a high, thin laugh. She thought she was being cute. Mr. Thomas did not laugh. He sat very still. He placed his hands flat on his leather briefcase. He looked at Penelope like she was a weed choking a healthy garden. "I am sorry. What did you say?" he asked. His voice was very quiet. Penelope kept smiling. "Oh, it is just family fun. Every family has one, right? The messy one who cannot handle anything valuable." My mother saw us from the dessert table. Her alarm bells rang. She marched over quickly. "Who is your guest, Fallon?" My mother used the word guest like it was a bad word. Mr. Thomas looked up at my mother. "I will tell everyone my name in just a minute." Then he leaned close to me. He whispered, "May I tell them the truth, Fallon?" I looked across the big room. I saw Jocelyn showing off her fake life. I saw my father sitting quietly in the corner. I had worn the Careless label for almost 30 years. I took a deep breath. I nodded. Mr. Thomas stood up. He smoothed his dark blue jacket. "Excuse me," he called out. He did not yell, but his deep, clear voice carried across the whole room. "May I have everyone's attention for a moment?" The music stopped. The waiters stopped pouring tea. 50 rich people turned their heads to look at the man standing by the kitchen doors. Mr. Thomas reached into his pocket. He pulled out a thick, cream-colored business card. He handed it to my mother. "My name is Mr. Thomas. I am the director of the National Botanical Society in Washington, D.C. My mother looked at the card. She blinked. "Well, I am Delilah. I drove 90 miles today," Mr. Thomas said, safely cutting her off. Then he pointed his hand right at me. "And I am here because of her." The room got as quiet as a winter morning. Mr. Thomas opened his briefcase. He pulled out the thick stack of papers. "Fallon is one of the most brilliant plant scientists in the country. She spent 10 years working to save extinct seeds. Last month, she grew a silver-blue flower that no one has seen in 50 years. He held up the papers so everyone could see the big gold seal on the front. "Our society gave Fallon a $250,000 prize. We gave her this money to build a brand new research center right here in Harpertown." He looked right at my mother. "I came today to buy the land she picked. Fallon wants to build the center on Plot 42, the land with the ruined historical greenhouse in your backyard." My mother's face completely changed. The blood left her cheeks. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. "I assumed you knew," Mr. Thomas said. He said it very simply. He did not sound mean. He just stated a fact. The silence in the room was heavy. Aunt Penelope's mouth hung open. Jocelyn dropped her shiny phone onto the table with a loud clack. At the main VIP table, Claire, my sister-in-law, sat up very straight. Her eyes locked onto my mother's pale face. Claire knew exactly why my mother was looking so scared. My mother was terrified, but she had practiced lying for a long time. She tried to smile, but her lips were shaking. "Well, of course we knew," my mother said in a squeaky high voice. "We are very proud of Fallon's little flowers, but you cannot build there. That old greenhouse land is totally useless." "It has the best soil in the state," Mr. Thomas replied calmly. Aunt Penelope tried to fix things. She reached out to touch my arm. "I was only joking earlier. Fallon knows I love her." I stepped back. Her hand grabbed only empty air. Jocelyn found me standing by the tall glass windows of the hall. She stood with her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her sparkling silk dress did not look magical anymore. It just looked heavy. She had a look on her face that I knew very well. It was the look she made when she was trying to act like she was right, even when she was totally wrong. "You know, you could have just told us about the prize money," she whispered angrily. "I tried. 3 years ago at Thanksgiving," I answered quietly. "You called it a cute little community garden project." Jocelyn blinked very fast. The memory was hiding somewhere under her fake stories about her $80,000 car and her rich imaginary clients. I didn't know it was $250,000. That is the whole point, Jocelyn. You never asked." She shifted her feet. She changed her plan. "Look, we are sisters. Can we please not do this right now? Everyone in the room is watching us. Everyone had been watching me fail my entire life. That was the real problem." Jocelyn's eyes got very wet. But she was not crying because she felt sorry for how she treated me. She was crying because she was embarrassed. Jocelyn had spent 30 years believing she was the glowing sun of our family. She was the pretty one, the rich one, the one who always sat at the front table. Now the whole town was watching a serious man in a dark suit offer me a fortune, while her own life was secretly falling apart. "Why do you always have to ruin my important nights?" she hissed at me. I let her words hang in the cool air. I wanted her to hear how selfish they sounded. "You have had 30 years of important nights, Jocelyn," I said softly. "I am just having one single hour." She stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She turned around and walked away, rubbing her wet eyes. I stayed by the window and took a slow breath. My mother waited until the crowd moved toward the dessert table. She always waited for the perfect moment. She found me near the cold steel doors of the kitchen. She liked to have her worst fights in dark, quiet corners where no one else could hear the truth. "Why would you do this?" Her voice was low and tight, like a pulled rubber band ready to snap. "Why would you bring a stranger here to destroy my family?" "I did not bring him to destroy anyone, Mom. He came to buy good dirt." "Your dirt," she said the word like it was a disease. "Do you know what I gave up for you girls? I sacrificed everything to keep this family safe and looking perfect." There it was, the same old story she had told for 30 years. The story where she was the tired hero, and I was the careless problem. "You did not keep us safe, Mom," I said. My voice was very calm. "You kept Jocelyn's secrets safe." Her eyes went wide. I know about the gray metal lockbox in the hall closet, I said. I found it when I was 20. I saw the red bank notices. I saw the math. I know Jocelyn's business is completely bankrupt. All the color washed out of my mother's face. She looked like a paper bag that had suddenly lost all its air. She stared at me, her mouth trembling. That is none of your business. It became my business tonight, Mom. I kept my voice steady. Because I know the biggest secret. I know why you looked so scared when Mr. Thomas asked to buy plot 42. I looked right into her terrified eyes. You sold grandmother's historical greenhouse to a building company 8 years ago. You sold the land to pay the bank so Jocelyn would not go to jail. She could not answer. There was no fake smile that could fix this. There was no lie big enough to cover it up. For my whole life, she told everyone I was the careless one, but I was the only one who had paid attention. I saw her deep, painful fear of being poor, and I refused to say sorry for surviving it. My mother turned around. She pushed open the heavy steel door and walked into the dark kitchen. I heard the lock click. The woman who had spent 30 years making me feel invisible had just hidden herself in the dark. I know what some of you might be thinking. How can a mother break one child just to glue the other one back together? But families are sometimes like old trees. When a branch gets sick, sometimes the tree cuts off a perfectly healthy branch just to survive. If you have ever been the good branch that was cut off and thrown in the dirt, you know exactly how cold it feels. Stay with me. The hardest truth of the night was still coming. Even Aunt Penelope tried to glue the broken pieces back together. It took her 25 minutes to build up her courage. She walked over to Mr. Thomas at our wobbly back table. She had put her bright, fake hostess smile back on her face. "Oh, Mr. Thomas, what a wonderful surprise," she sang sweetly. "You know, I have always told everyone that Fallon has a magical touch with flowers. She is very gifted." Mr. Thomas was holding a glass of iced water. He did not take a sip. He looked at Penelope the way a smart gardener looks at a harmful weed. "Did you?" he asked smoothly. "Because 25 minutes ago, you called her a messy dirt digger who ruins valuable things." The words hit the air like a dropped plate. Aunt Penelope's neck turned dark red, and the color slowly crawled up to her cheeks. I was just making a little joke," she stammered. "Every family has inside jokes. Inside jokes are supposed to make people smile," Mr. Thomas said softly. He did not yell. He just dropped the heavy truth right in front of her. From across the large room, Uncle Roland's quiet voice floated over. "Penny, sit down." It was the first time in their long marriage that gentle Uncle Roland had ever told his wife what to do in public. Penelope stared at him. He did not look away. Penelope slowly sat down in a folding chair. For the very first time at the spring floral gala, Aunt Penelope was completely quiet. It was the kind of quiet that happens when your worst mask falls off, and everyone finally sees your real face. Then, the biggest shift of the night happened. The most quiet person at the gold-lettered VIP table stood up. It was Claire, Connor's new wife, the smart, quiet accountant who had been watching the family's toxic game all year. Claire walked slowly toward the center of the hall. Her hands were perfectly still. "Mr. Thomas cannot buy the land at plot 42, Claire said. Her voice was not loud, but it echoed off the high ceiling. "Because my mother-in-law does not own it anymore." The entire room froze like a paused movie. Claire looked at the empty seat where my mother had been sitting, then she looked at the crowd. 8 years ago, Delilah secretly sold the historical greenhouse land to a commercial building company. She sold it for $150,000. She did it to save Jocelyn from defaulting on her bank loans. She lied and said the land was useless. She hid the tax papers from everyone. But I work with numbers for a living. I saw the messy tax returns 3 months ago. The truth fell over the room like a heavy winter snow. There were no more secrets left. The perfect family was entirely broken. Mr. Thomas did not look shocked. He calmly opened his brown briefcase again. He had the floor, and he used his time perfectly. He pulled out 3 more large photographs. He held up the first one. It was a picture of a dying 100-year-old apple orchard in Ohio. This town was going to chop these trees down for firewood, Mr. Thomas told the silent crowd. Fallon worked in the cold for 6 months. She saved the soil. The town had an apple harvest this year. He held up a second picture. A massive, sick oak tree in a Texas town square. The city thought it was dead. Fallon found the exact root disease and cured it. The mayor wrote our society a letter thanking the scientist who saved their town's history. He set the pictures on the table. "The common thread," Mr. Thomas said, looking around the room, "is that Fallon finds incredible value in the things that other people throw away." Jocelyn was still sitting at the VIP table. She was completely alone. Her shiny phone was put away. For the first time in her life, she was not the glowing center of the room. She was just a tired woman with a lot of debt. The big hall slowly started to split. People moved like water. A few of my mother's older friends walked quickly toward the locked kitchen doors to whisper. But other people, cousins, neighbors, town leaders, started walking toward my wobbly table in the back. They looked at me differently. They looked at me like someone who had survived a long, cold winter. I sat there and thought about what I could do. I could walk up to the front stage. I could take the microphone. I could tell the town about every ruined birthday cake, every cheap plastic gift, every time they called me careless. I could make them feel the exact same pain I felt for 30 years. But I am a person who grows things. I do not burn things down. I made 2 choices. I would go talk to my father, and then I would go home. I stood up and thanked Mr. Thomas. Thank you for driving all this way. I mean it. I did not do this to start a family fight, Fallon, he said warmly. I did this because your hard work deserves the sunlight. We will find a way to get that greenhouse land back. He handed me a thick, dark blue folder. It was the official $250,000 society grant paperwork. Take your time reading it, he said. I took the folder. I tucked it under my arm. Then I turned and walked across the long, bright room. Every single eye in the hall followed me. They were not looking at me because I was the careless girl with dirt on her knees. They were looking at me because I was the only honest person in the room. My father was still sitting in his padded chair in the far corner. My father had not moved from his padded chair next to the fern. He did not stand up when Claire told the truth. He did not move when my mother ran away. He just sat with his hands resting on his wooden cane. He watched his broken family like a man watching a house slowly fall down. His eyes were wet and shiny. I pulled a folding chair next to his. I sat down and took his hand. His fingers felt cold. I found the leather book, Dad, I said softly. The one in your heavy gray winter coat. His chin started to tremble. He looked up at the bright ceiling lights, then back at me. 18 pictures, I said. You took 18 pictures of my plants. For 3 seconds it was completely quiet between us. Then, in a very soft voice, he whispered, I should have taken more. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the glossy picture of me smiling next to the rare silver blue flower. And the brown envelope, Dad. In the garage workbench. You kept 10 years of my life in there. He squeezed my hand. I should have spoken up, he said. His voice cracked. I should have stopped them from treating you like dirt. You kept my garden safe in the dark, Dad, I said. I placed the picture of the silver blue flower in his hand. He held it like it was a fragile glass bird. Please put this picture in the living room now. Don't hide it in a coat anymore. He looked at the picture. He rubbed his thumb over my smiling face. He nodded slowly. His nod was full of all the heavy words he could not say. Suddenly, my mother marched across the room like a storm made of expensive silk. She had come out of the dark catering kitchen. She waited until the crowd moved away. She always wanted to fight without witnesses, but tonight, everyone was still watching. Fallon Eleonora, she hissed. Using my full name was her way of trying to own me. You bring a stranger to my spring gala just to humiliate me? I stood up. I kept my hands by my sides. My voice was as calm as a quiet pond. Nobody humiliated you, Mom. Mr. Thomas came to talk about my science grant. She let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Your science? I sold that greenhouse land for $150,000 so you girls could have a roof over your heads. Jocelyn was talking about ending her life because of her bank debt. I sacrificed my own soul to keep this family safe. There it was. She finally admitted it out loud. You did not keep us both safe, I said softly. You only protected Jocelyn. I did the best I could, she yelled, her voice echoing. I fed you both. You bought Jocelyn $125 custom art frames and $80,000 leased cars. You gave me $12 plastic trowels and threw my blue hydrangea in the trash. You did not treat us the same. Her face twisted with anger. You were always so messy, so careless. You never knew how to act in a nice home. I let her angry words pass right through me. They did not hurt anymore. I was never careless, Mom. You just gave me nothing valuable to hold. You made sure the whole town thought I was broken, just to hide your own empty bank account. The big room went dead silent. 50 people heard the absolute truth. Nobody moved. My mother's face broke. She started to cry. But she was not crying because she was sorry for hurting me. She was crying because she was finally caught. After everything I did to protect Jocelyn, she sobbed. This is how you repay me? I am not repaying anything, I said. I am leaving. I turned away from her crying face. I walked across the bright, polished floor. Mr. Thomas was standing near the heavy glass doors. He handed me the thick, dark blue folder. "We will see you in Washington next month for the official grant signing," he said kindly. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for everything. Thank your strong seeds," he smiled. "They did all the hard work." I looked back at the big hall one last time. Aunt Penelope was sitting in a folding chair, staring at the floor. Jocelyn was sitting at the VIP table, completely alone, her face hidden in her hands. My mother was crying near the dessert table. Uncle Roland looked right at me from across the room and gave me a firm, respectful nod. Then Claire, my sister-in-law, walked away from the VIP table. She came right up to me. Her eyes were sharp but kind. "Fallon," she said quietly, "when you buy that land back and build your research center, can I come see it? I would love to help you keep the books." I looked at Claire. She had just blown up the family's biggest lie to protect me. "Any time, Claire," I smiled. "I will give you the very first tour." She gave me a quick, tight hug. Then I turned around and pushed open the heavy glass doors. I looked at the tile floor near the catering kitchen doors. A glossy gala program featuring the fake honored host family list was lying face down. Nobody had bothered to pick it up. I stepped right past it. Some things are worth saving, and some things you just let blow away. I got in my car. I set the dark blue grant folder on the passenger seat. On top of it, I placed the photograph of the silver blue flower, the copy my father wanted me to keep. "Keep blooming," he had whispered before I left. A quiet pact between two quiet people. I pulled out of the community center parking lot. I didn't check the rearview mirror. The road leading out of Harpertown stretched ahead, straight and quiet in the cool spring air. I drove with my windows down. I left the radio off. The wind was enough. The sheer relief of the silence was enough. 40 miles out, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. 2 words. "Always proud." I pulled onto the shoulder. I read it twice. The screen blurred for a second and I realized I was crying. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, dropped the phone in the cup holder and kept driving. I had spent 30 years trying to prove I wasn't careless. Turns out, I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to stop trying to grow in poisoned soil. Around mile 60, I passed a massive, overgrown commercial lot right off the highway. It was covered in thick brush and cracked concrete, the kind of forgotten space people speed right past. I slowed down. I looked at the dark, rich earth pushing up through the cracks. I smiled. That land might be worth clearing. I kept driving. 10 months later, in early spring, the National Botanical Society's quarterly journal came out. My face was on the cover. The face my family had dismissed as messy and negligent for 3 decades. I was photographed standing in front of the wrought iron gates of Plot 42. The society had flexed their institutional muscle and bought my grandmother's historical greenhouse back from the commercial developers for $300,000, double what my mother had secretly sold it for. I wasn't smiling a wide, performative smile. I was just standing there, grounded and present, exactly the way my father taught me. My father framed the cover. He hung it in the living room, right next to Jocelyn's faded high school pageant ribbons. My mother never took it down. She never mentioned it either. It just hung there, a quiet, undeniable fact in a house that had spent decades running from them. Jocelyn texted me once. "Saw the news. Congrats," I replied. "Thank you, nothing more." Aunt Penelope hasn't spoken a word to me since the spring gala. Uncle Roland sent a letter written on yellow legal pad paper. I should have stood up to them years ago. Sorry doesn't fix it, but it's all I have. I folded the letter and tucked it in my desk drawer. My mother never called. I didn't wait by the phone. That Thanksgiving, I didn't drive to my parents' house. Instead, I drove to the reclaimed greenhouse at Plot 42. I walked the perimeter, tested the soil pH, and measured the foundation for the new glass structures. Claire came with me. She brought coffee and her sharp accounting mind, helping me map out the budget for the new Botanical Research Center. We were building something real on the exact spot where a massive lie had been buried. In my university lab late that afternoon, the sunlight coming through the windows was a deep, warm amber. The small, carved wooden seed box my father gave me was still sitting on my desk. Inside were the photos I took of myself when no one else was watching. My first successful sprout, my first soil analysis chart, the day my grant was finalized. I added 2 new things, the Society Journal cover and the new property deed for Plot 42. Then, I added one more, the photo of me at 8 years old, standing in the dirt holding that faded yellow bucket. The one where everyone in the frame was looking right past me. I held it up. A small girl in an overgrown yard, holding dead weeds. I held up the new magazine cover, a 38-year-old woman standing firmly on her own restored land. "Same girl," I said quietly to the empty room. "Same girl." I placed the photos side by side in the wooden box and closed the lid softly. Some people keep trophies. I keep proof that I learned how to survive the drought. Here is what I know now. You can't force a dead branch to bloom if the tree is rotting from the inside. You can't restore a family that insists on living in a metaphorical cage of secrets, but you can set strict boundaries. You can choose where to plant your roots. Every rare, extinct flower I've ever brought back to life started the exact same way. Someone looked at the dry, gray seed and called it worthless. And then someone else looked closer. They saw the potential. They saw what it could become if someone just provided the right environment and cared enough to wait. I was never the careless one. I was just planted in the wrong garden. That is my story. 30 years of toxic labels, one mentor with a briefcase, and a wooden box full of proof that I was always worth cultivating. If this story resonates with your own family dynamics, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe,